Welcome to the ReReview podcast, where we watch movies from our past with a perspective from today. Your hosts are Matt, Bobby, and Austin. We have an immense love for the films of our youth, so we're taking a look back to see if they still hold up. In this episode, we are discussing Jurassic Park, released in 1993, directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Sam Neill, Laura Dern, Jeff Goldblum, and Samuel L. Jackson. This movie is based upon the book written by Michael Crichton. Jurassic Park tells the story of a dreamer using burgeoning technology to bring back long lost creatures from Earth's past into present day. Now, this is a fair warning. We are spoiling a 28-year-old movie, so if you haven't seen it, we'll be revealing key plot points. This was my choice, so Austin, I'm going to tell you how I felt about this movie to start, and then bring Matt and Bobby in here. So, rewatching this film, this many years later, it's almost surprising that the sense of awe and wonder that I felt as a youth, as a kid, watching this film, still stands today. It's almost strange that the things that I'm aware of as an adult and how these films are made, and especially how this particular film was made, might take away from it. And usually time, tends to reveal the cracks. And I'm not saying there aren't any cracks in this film, but it's so easy for me to forgive what issues it may have, because it just feels right. You go through this story, for me, completely attached to these characters. Just from everyone's place and how they fit into the story, and sort of the little bit of the tale that they have as they go through this experience of going to this unknown place just because they are either an expert, or because they're a lawyer and they want to make sure they get paid, or they're just a kid who wants to see what their grandfather's done because he built a theme park. And how cool is that? You're a kid. And I could imagine being back in that place of a kid, dreaming of going to a place like that, thinking, man, one day this is going to be real. Thinking that they're going to do this without messing it up like they do in the movie. Maybe that's still a dream I have, that kid Austin would like to experience. But there's just an attachment that I think I have this film that, it could be nostalgia, but if you ask me, hey, you want to watch Jurassic Park today? I'd be like, yep, let's do it without question. Throw it up, throw it on. However we want to watch it, let's watch it. And one quick takeaway I'll say is it was probably one of the first films where I just started memorizing lines, where they just had these beats and these points where, you're just out in public and you're saying these things as if they're a natural thing to say in the world. But you joke with it with friends. Examples are clever girl, or the one, that hurts so much for us that we're even remotely nerdy. It's a Unix system. I know this. It still hurts to this day, but
It
you run
hurts.
with it. It hurts. Or Nedry's the computer virus when it kicks in, and just hearing you didn't say the magic word, and I remember as a kid just loving that, like, what is going on? And it just it's just one of those things where, as I think through the beats of the movie and how they set everything up, of starting with two people who are paleontologists who look at these very fascinating creatures that I think as kids we were all semi obsessed with, and then having them put in a place where these things can be real for them. And more importantly, that first scene of Hammond telling them, welcome to Jurassic Park, and the sense of awe that they have as Sam Neill's character, Grant, kneels down, and just like, is this happening? Is this really happening? And that just carries through the movie. And I yes, let's watch it again. Can we watch it again? Bobby, how do you
Yes.
feel about Jurassic Park?
Yes. I mean, I absolutely agree with you 100%. And like you said, I don't know if it's nostalgia. I mean, maybe some of it is. Maybe some, like 15-year-old kid will watch it and say, I don't know what's here. But I mean, to me, like, I don't see how that's possible, because, I mean, I do. I think I mean, I really enjoyed this movie. I mean, I would go as far to say that I love it. I mean, some of the reasons I do, of course, to piggyback on what you said, like, some of the characters are so compelling. Like, for example, like Alan Grant, who he pretty clearly does not like kids at the beginning of the movie, and has a pretty memorable conversation with this kid about how, like, a raptor will like, or a dinosaur will like cut your guts out and then eat you while you're watching. And at the end of the movie, so he's trying to traumatize a child at the beginning, and at the end, he's got two kids around his arm. And so, like, I mean, there's a really great character arc there for him. And yeah, I agree. Like, there's a lot of quotes. There's a lot of really great stuff in this movie. And I mean, just from not only from the movie itself, but also from a filmmaking standpoint, like it's interesting how some of those kinds of things are parallel. Like, so in the movie, there's a line where they say, they look at the fossil and they say, okay, it looks like our profession is extinct now. Well, a very interesting real life parallel to that is stop motion animation. Of course, stop motion animation still exists, but one huge thing about the historical significance of this movie is that it was a big jump in terms of computer animation, where a lot of the dinosaurs were full motion computer animated dinosaurs for the first time. Of course, beautifully integrated with real puppets and real, like, gigantic life-size Tyrannosaurus Rex sized puppets. But definitely like a jump for a huge leap forward in terms of the technology of movie making that's still like being pushed forward today. So I think, like, for Jurassic Park in particular, like, a lot of things had to happen for this movie to hit where it hit, and it did hit on a lot of great things that I think make this work. I mean, I think the music is really, really great. I mean, I've listened to the music live at venues like the Hollywood Bowl, and the very first note started to play from that French horn, and the guy in front of me and the row in front of me says, "Oh, it's Jurassic Park." And then like it starts going, and then the big cheer when everybody else notices that it's Jurassic Park. And so, like, like, the music is really great. I mean, like, the movie is just, to me, just really, really well done, and there's a whole lot that we can go into. Like you said, is it a perfect movie? No, it's not a perfect movie. And I mean, I don't want to like bash on it, because I do love it. So, but I mean, one of the things that's kind of like, I don't know, maybe it's like a pet peeve I have in the movie, and I'll just go into it now, is that, like, where you mentioned the Unix system. I mean, I just, it kind of bugs me in movies where they decide to make an overly graphical system to, like, kind of like, it's very clear that it's just kind of showing the audience how this is done and how we're going to move around, and not actually show, like, I guess, like, code is boring in movies. Like, if she was like just typing in ones and zeros, I mean, I don't really even know what I'm just exactly what Unix looks like, but, like, I'm assuming it's like code and like typing in languages on a computer, and like you're looking at like maybe like a black and white screen, or and you're like, oh, God forbid we show actual code in a movie, but that's really like just a nitpicky thing based on, like, like, just a pet peeve. But I mean, yes, I do love the movie, and I would absolutely again watch it right now again. Matt,
I
what do
get
you
that pet peeve. I mean, it definitely comes from a place of understanding that, for most films, by the time they try to show real world technology, today's technology, it's already outdated by a few years.
But I mean, I just find it interesting that, I mean, I understand. I could just picture like some boardroom where they have this big dinosaur movie, and they're like, okay, like, start writing code, and it's going to be one of the major plot points to make everything work again. And then they show like this girl like writing code, and then they're like, wait, the movie dies right here. Like, we had all this momentum going into it, and I guess I understand it from a entertainment perspective, but I mean, I just think that it maybe even does a disservice to not actually show the actual code. I mean, there's a lot of people who maybe are like, "Hey, I'm interested in becoming a STEM person. Like, I want to learn how to code." Like, why are you shying away from this? But I digress.
Just a bit. Matt, tell us how you felt about the movie.
And I'll play devil's advocate right there. They did show coding in this movie. They just didn't show it in that particular point with that character. So it's there. So it's not like they completely got rid of it.
You're right. You're right.
I will say this movie probably is pretty significant because it's what made me want to get into filmmaking. It's what made me get into editing. I mean, I was probably 8 when I watched it. And, I immediately, got my parents to get me editing software on my computer, started editing stuff together. So it obviously has a pretty significant place in my life. And it is an amazing movie. I can rewatch it infinite amounts of time. I think the music is iconic without a doubt. You could play this song pretty much probably anywhere and they'd probably recognize what it was for. So much so that I feel like it's almost became a handicap for the sequels because they've never really expanded or they couldn't really go beyond what the original soundtrack was. If I didn't, if I removed the original Jurassic Park theme song from the sequels, it wouldn't really feel like Jurassic Park anymore. But with all of that said, I will start bringing out the things I didn't like about the movie, just so I'm a little bit different from all the gushing that has happened prior to me jumping on.
How dare you?
Not that it makes it necessarily bad. It's just, and these are definitely, the 10 things wrong with, that, part of a video, I suppose, where it just breaks down some things that don't ruin the movie. Nowhere are any of these points going to ruin the movie, but they are definitely going to, make Steven Spielberg and the movie bring it down just a little bit so it's off that top shelf. Because by and far, if you ask me what is probably my most favorite movie I've ever watched, if this isn't on the top, it's really close. So
I'm gonna put this out there for you, listener. Disclaimer: this is supposed to be a Jurassic Park love fest, so Matt's going off script right now.
I will be the bad guy. So yeah, like I said, there's a lot of things that are great about it. If I had to make my little 10 points of what I didn't like about it, I don't really understand why Ian Malcolm was invited to this.
Because he's amazing. Answer's done.
Well, they said that the lawyer.
Go on.
He was brought by the lawyer, right?
What you're saying.
Well, here's the thing, right? Like I understand, Laura Dern and with Alan Grant and everything. Like it makes sense being, having some connection to the prehistoric with Ian Malcolm. And I get it. He's supposed to be a rock star and all this stuff or whatever. But in, a way, it feels kind of weird because it always felt like the lawyer was the antagonist of the story to a certain extent. I mean, obviously the dinosaurs are a big part of that, but it seemed like, the lawyer and Nedry were kind of really the antagonist of it. So you kind of feel like the lawyer would have brought somebody who was and to be fair, at the end, Malcolm did scrutinize the crap out of that park, but he didn't really have any real basis off of that. I mean, his entire thing was chaos theory, right? But like you said, he stood out. He's a character that probably should have been killed off on paper, and he probably showed up on set, and Spielberg was like, nope, we're changing the script. He can't die,
Oh, the sadness if they killed that man.
Exactly.
It might have saved us from the sequels. All right, continue on.
It did bother me that it felt like there wasn't a lot of thought put into the security of the place. The fact that the entirety of the programming is dictated by one programmer is beyond me. For a man who spared no expense, he sure cheaped out on his programming staff. And the fact that, there was no real backup systems or security beyond, what was presented. And I get it. The movie wouldn't have happened if they were actually doing their due diligence. But if I had a Tyrannosaurus Rex there would be 5,000, there would be automated turret guns on every fence that was run off of diesel or something. Like there would be so much security that there would be, no chance anything would happen. But again, I get it. Movie wouldn't happen, but it still bugs me.
I get that. That makes sense.
I mean, it was a tropical storm, right? But I guess if you're in a tropical island, you should be prepared for tropical storms, right? So it was like a hurricane level thing.
Well, I mean, obviously that's not what caused it. That was just like the mask, right? That's what allowed Nedry to kind of get away with some of it. But it still feels like there was it was an easy out, I guess, to get everything to go wrong. But again, not a major, thing that I can't fault the movie for, because most horror movies would never happen if you applied any level of logic to your security system. I do feel that a really nitpicky thing I have about the movie was the fact that for whatever reason, they got to the point where things were going good and they sent Sam Jackson, Arnold, by himself out to the shed. I was like, send Muldoon with you with a gun. I don't know if he would have been able to do as much, but why you got to send Sam Jackson by himself?
The answer is easy. It's Samuel L. Jackson, and it was just across the compound.
Well, didn't he needed to do something technical, right? Like pull the...
You send armed security with the man. I know it's Sam Jackson, but come on.
You're killing me, but I love it. I do love it.
Yeah, and some of the stuff, I mean, obviously there's the really well-known stuff, like the sense of continuity gets lost sometimes, like the T-Rex, pin, it's walking out of the hole and all of a sudden there's a, waterfall from said hole. So I'm guessing this T-Rex knows parkour as well.
Yeah, I don't know where the ravine came from. All of a sudden there's just a ravine somewhere where they fall down. The Jeep falls down.
Makes no sense whatsoever. And maybe that was continuity. Maybe there was something they just cut out, or maybe, they felt like it wasn't really necessary for the plot. But it still bugs me to this day to see that scene and be like, well, what the heck? I have a problem with the canister. One, I love the shaving cream canister. I love the idea behind it. I wish that it had played more of a part in the sequels.
Me too. Set it up. It made you think it was going to be. I mean,
I don't understand.
It was so specific that it was like, oh yeah, this is something's going to happen as a result of this can falling here, and someone's going to get a hold of it.
I don't understand why they dropped that.
I do vaguely remember there was a video game that came out. It might have been the PS2 days, that it focused on the can and a team that was going to go extract it, essentially, because I think it had like a homing beacon or something inside of it. And so like that was the whole premise of it, was to get the can back. And I do remember hearing that the whole premise of what happens with it and it get covered in the mud, like the fact that it focused on it, I thought was to indicate maybe there's going to be, this was pre-Marvel, end credit scenes, but I thought that you're going to see like some team helicopter in, grab it, and it was like da-da-da, and all of a sudden that was going to be what Lost World was going to be. But I do get the feeling that the whole premise of it was just to show that this thing that Nedry essentially had people die for and he himself get killed for just gets buried in the mud, right? Like it's just gone. And so it was just the karma of it, I suppose. But it always did bug me, because to me it would seem like a perfect mechanism for a sequel, rather than some of the sequels that we did get.
I agree. I mean, these are all things that I will say my love and gushing of it is the things I must forgive in order to keep that loving and gushing, because even as a kid, those inconsistencies would hit me. And I was just like, well, this is weird. But all right, the movie's still cool.
And don't get me wrong, like I'm just playing devil's advocate in this one. I mean, I love this movie. There's way more, that's good about it than any bad. And that bad is all nitpicking, to be honest. I mean, like I said, the CG and practical effects in this movie is amazing. I love the blending of it, the way that it was done. I think
amazing.
Even comparing it to the modern sequels, I feel like the CG holds up just as well. There is some CG that doesn't hold up as well, but for the most part, I think they covered for the inadequacies of modern technology and blended it well enough and used shots properly. I feel like this movie had a sense of scale and wonder that we never got in any of the sequels. I feel like you could feel the passion for the idea of, dinosaurs. You could tell that Steven Spielberg definitely loved dinosaurs probably growing up, having his own little plastic triceratops and T-Rex and everything. You could definitely feel that sense of wonder in this movie that I don't think they ever really recaptured. No matter how much they try to play the Jurassic Park theme song during those moments to try to make you feel that nostalgia, they never really worked nearly as much as they did in this movie. And at the end of the day, just as an example, I went to Disney Sea in Tokyo. And if you ever go, by the way, an amazing park to go to. If you had to go to one Disney park, that's the park I would go to. There's a part where you walk through these series of buildings, and then it just opens up to this huge lake with a volcano in the background and this, Italian Mediterranean buildings and everything. And when I walked through and I saw that for the first time, I heard the Jurassic Park music in my head. It's just that sense of grandeur and wonder, and it's just associated with it. And to John Williams' credit, it's an amazing score that plays off that kind of cinematography and shot composition. And yeah, I can't gush about it enough. And I'm sorry I had to bring up the negatives, but
Oh no, it's okay. People do need to hear. I mean, the thing about watching a movie this long after is there's so much material on this film about how it was made, the things that they did. Recently we watched a comparison showing how, an update on, I think it was the Blu-ray, and how they changed the coloring, took out a lot of the things that were left in the shots. Specifically the lines on the Dilophosaurus when it starts spitting venom. I those things that I definitely didn't notice as a kid look really glaring when they're pointed out to you, and it's kind of amazing to see what technology has brought us forward to in terms of how you can make something like this look cleaner per se. But as you mentioned, the sequels kind of never hit that same stride. I mean, I wish they did. There's a part of me that really still wants them to. I remember the first time I saw the second one, and I wanted to love it. Like, I was just like, I have to love this because I love the first one so much. And now there was a lot of forgiving in that one, and years later, just kind of seeing, well, it isn't the same. And that character that probably should have died, in Malcolm, he wasn't that same rock star. And I get it. He had a kid. Those things change it. But there was that element, like you said, if this person on the island ended up really representing the clearest point of thought earliest on, and it wasn't supposed to come from him. Again, the lawyer brought him because the lawyer's just like, well, here's my scientist, and this guy's up in the sky saying, "Oh, the butterfly flaps its wing in Peking." Just, as a kid seeing that scene, I was like, what's wrong with this dude? But he ends up being quintessential, and you have to love him. You have to love him in the back of the Jeep. You have to love him helping Hammond, when they're trying to turn the power back on. It's just one of those things where, there's a point where I think, if we can go back and fix it, I think we'd love it. Maybe tell us how the car flipped around on the same track. maybe help us out with that just a little bit. But it still just feels right.
So let me ask you this question. It's movie question, but it's kind of a little bit more than that. We're what, 5, 6 Jurassic franchise movies in or whatever. If it really existed, would you go?
Man, all right. Is it the line that the lawyer wanted, where Hammond has to tell him this is not a park for the super rich? Can I actually afford to go?
Yeah, we'll assume that they got their stuff together. And to its credit, that's one thing I did like about Jurassic World. You got to see an operational theme park, right? Mm-hmm. You got to see what it was supposed to be, and it was very, SeaWorld, Disney World, in its appearance and function. But we'll assume that's affordable. We'll assume they got their stuff together. They had their GitHub instead of Nedry, so they could have their proper code and backup code out there for redundancy. It's as safe as it possibly could be. Would you go?
Yeah, it's sort of the question. I think if you're someone who's willing to go to a zoo, I don't know how you wouldn't go to Jurassic Park. It really kind of is the same idea. As long as that element of danger isn't there. And I think to set up a park like this in real life, it would have to exist and run on its own for a good 10 to 15 years to see how the animals actually work in captivity. Because yeah, I think the idea of bringing tiny little humans around, and the idea of electrified fences or however you would do that tech today, I think it would be interesting. But the I mean, have you stood next to an elephant? It can be the idea of being next to like these large creatures that are so much bigger than us and making us feel small. I think there is a good part of that for humanity. But as we know, and which is what the movie proves, typically when it comes to humans and animals, we don't treat them that great. So while I may want to go to the park, I will feel guilty as hell doing it. Bobby?
Yeah, I mean, I think the same as you. I mean, the very first thought that popped in my head was, no, I don't want to see it. It's not real. It's genetically engineered. It's fake. But then the more I thought about it, the more I was thinking, yeah, probably. But I mean, it's interesting because I remember having this thought that when the sequels came up, thinking, how on earth could this even be possible to even have a sequel? All these people died, or at least three or four. I don't know how many people died. Was it four people died in the first one? And then they're like, oh, okay, let's just ignore the fact that these people died and that there was a big deal of like people being mauled to death by dinosaurs. Let's go ahead and make the theme park anyway for the sequels, and let's just go on like nothing happened. And then, oh, like more people died in San Diego and various other places in the sequel. And then, oh yeah, Jurassic World. Let's just have the theme park anyway, despite all those people who died. And I remember thinking at the time of watching these movies, thinking, there's no way that they would actually make these theme parks. But now I do believe with the almighty dollar is king that they would absolutely make these theme parks, no matter how many people have died in the
And
in
you
the
have learned the
past.
lesson of the films.
I mean, well, speaking of the lessons of the films, I mean, one of the things that's interesting, I mean, we talked about Ian Malcolm a lot. I think he has a really pivotal line in the movies, which is, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. And I think that's like maybe what the movie's trying to say is, like you should think about if you should do things as opposed to not think about just, hey, like we have all this technology now, let's just do it. It's I think there's an ethics there that need to be discussed. So
It's hard because, as you mentioned, the almighty dollar tends to push things forward in light of ethical concerns. So you get to places with technology because it moves so fast that lawmakers, government, industries can't even keep up because things have changed without anyone asking the question. Because disruption can be good.
And to be fair, it was almost a space race. One of the elements that I feel like always gets lost and forgotten about in this movie is they had competitors.
mhm.
Yeah, they were behind by 10 years in research and development, but they were trying to do the same thing. So clearly, there was a drive to do this. Somebody was going to do it. And yeah, you can argue that Hammond definitely slacked off in some areas, but at least I didn't feel that he was doing it just for the buck, right? He wanted to make the flea circus real. And I think maybe he just got caught up in that, right? He just got caught up in the grandeur of it that he didn't really, stop and like, these are actual things that have teeth and claws and we're food to them. So maybe we should hold back, and whenever we produce the T-Rex, be like, no, let's not do the T-Rex. Let's do this thing that just eats grass and is only like 4 foot tall. How about that one? We'll start with that one and go from there.
Yeah, there's probably a thing in there of why would you make a velociraptor?
Oh, for sure.
Why?
And there's even a line in the movie about having a venomous plant in the lobby or something.
Mm-hmm.
I forget the exact line, but they're like, "Oh, you have this venomous plant because you thought it looked cool, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a creature that has the ability to kill you if it had to."
Yeah, the ethics portion of it. I mean, part of what makes the film so great is sort of the what what are we meant to do while we're here on this planet? And when we have our big dreams, do we push for them at all costs, even if they could, cause hurt? Or, you ignore that portion of it. It's, Hammond at the end saying that he is not willing to sign off on this part. It's his realization after a lot of hurt, unfortunately. At the same time, if he didn't spare all expenses and he paid an entry,
right? So I have a question about that for you guys. Did him deciding not to do it ring true to you guys for his character?
For Hammond's character,
yeah,
I think so, because, well, I'm probably building that connection to his grandchildren.
Yeah,
because he was building something special for him, but also for his grandkids. That's why they were there.
Mm-hmm.
He's giving them something that he could only dream of as a kid, and he made it reality for them. And that's what parents want to do for the kids in their life, right? So it makes sense that seeing everything that happens, he eventually breaks down and says, what, this isn't worth it.
I mean, it was an interesting plot point, because I thought that, someone who has the means to create something like Jurassic Park, usually they're like a ruthless businessman type. I'm just stereotyping here, maybe not, but who would say like, hey, look at what I've created, like, I feel like they'd be like, look, like, like, I can move forward with this and I can make it better to where, I don't, this kind of thing doesn't, I can make it to where this kind of thing doesn't happen again, instead of just pulling the plug on the entire thing.
Yeah, but I'd say it is a stereotype, because the idea is you hear about the Steve Jobs type of leader. You don't hear about other leaders who get the job done without being a big, gigantic asshole.
You said it, I did it.
Yeah. and in a way, maybe someone would argue, well, that's Hammond's failing, because he wasn't such a hard ass. Even though I guess you'd say he was with Nedry, he didn't want to pay him. There was a human element to him. He wasn't so wrought with this dream that it had to come at all costs. But who do we hear about in the news? The people who are the most extreme, the Musks, the Jobs, those people who really stand out because they represent the fringe. There are tons of companies that exist and thrive without having bombastic, eccentric type leaders who care for their workers and get stuff done. But you don't hear about those, because there's no fun in that.
That's fun for me. I'd like to work there.
You want to work it? Okay, you want to work at Jurassic Park. You don't just want to go visit. You want to work there.
I could be a Unix programmer.
You need to make sure that life insurance is good then.
It's got to be really good. So with your help, listener, we can get Bobby a one-way ticket to Isla Nublar so you can go visit the various creatures of Jurassic Park.
So I want to do a break in this for just a second to have a story kind of like Matt's that was a very Jurassic Park centric story for me. So I went to Kauai for my honeymoon, and one of my wife's gifts for me was to go on a helicopter tour. And it was a helicopter tour in Kauai where you land at that same landing port that they land at in the movie that's in front of the waterfall. And it was a really amazing experience for me because they actually play the music. And so you really feel like you're in the movie as you're like kind of like rounding around the like ridges of the island, and it looks just like it is in the movie. And then you land on the helicopter landing pad that's right in front of the waterfall, just like they do in the movie. And it was a really amazing experience for me. I really felt like I was living the movie. What's interesting about that actual helicopter pad is that it's actually private land now. And so somebody is like charging the helicopter company to like land there. And it's very interesting. It's actually part of a ecological preserve, and you have to wear hospital booties on your feet on your shoes so that you don't like track invasive species from the helicopter onto the island. But a very fun experience that made me feel like I lived a very great movie.
I'll just say I'm spoiled, and for both Matt and Bobby's experiences, I've experienced those experiences, and they're friggin' fantastic. Definitely go to Disney Sea and take a helicopter ride in Kauai. It's amazing. So with that said, I think we have overwhelming recommendation here to definitely watch this film. Watch it as many times as you enjoy it. Yes, there are issues, but there's just a joy and something really wonderful about this film, even all these years later, and it'll be one of those films that just stands up to the test of time. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.